Today on Let's Talk Jonesboro, we have Rebekah Evans, and she is the local group leader for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Welcome, Rebekah.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tell us a little bit about what gun sense means, because a lot of people ears perk up when they hear gun sense in this area.
Absolutely. So Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America is a grassroots, nonpartisan movement of Americans from all kinds of backgrounds who are advocating for gun safety, for gun violence prevention, and for really common sense gun reform. So we are made up of gun owners and non-gun owners alike. We advocate for middle ground solutions that are evidence-based, where both sides can come together and make some differences, because we believe that gun violence right now is a public health crisis. And we're definitely seeing an uptick in gun violence even in our own community here, and so we are just a group of people who want to be part of that solution.
Well, there's, guns it's a difficult thing, I think, in America, because guns are such a part of our history and our creation. I mean, we're not an ancient civilization like places across the oceans. We're not, our ancestors from the South hit the beaches. They didn't go through Staten Island or whatever. They hit the beaches with their guns and made their way west and needed all that. So we've got that. We've got the Second Amendment that comes from the struggle for freedom, and it's been handed down where we've got this dogma that guns are as reverent as our religion in some cases. And yet at the same time, we have this problem that cannot be dismissed with a simple phrase like guns aren't the problem and whatever. There's a whole lot to try to take on here, is there not?
I agree, and we've gotten kind of polarized into these extreme positions without listening to each other and without realizing that there's a lot of nuance that needs to happen in our conversations rather than these taglines that we like to spout. And that's one thing I really love about Moms, is that we fully support the Second Amendment, and we believe that supporting the Second Amendment goes hand in hand with some really common sense gun reforms and gun regulations, that those things go together to support our Constitution and to make our country a safe place for us to live.
You've hit on something that is, I guess it's a little personal to me, because I'm maybe a little bit off topic, but I feel like as Americans, we're a spectrum, but you said we've been shoved to either side, and I think we all have more common ground than uncommon.
Absolutely.
And yet when you say you're either pro-gun or anti-gun, that shoves you that way. You can't have a reasonable conversation about when it is appropriate to see guns and when it's not. Tell me what tenets Moms Demand Action believes in or is appropriate for guns.
Sure. Well, we have several goals. One is we want to close the deadly loopholes that allow criminals, domestic abusers, and other people maybe with serious mental health problems to access guns that they shouldn't be able to access. And this is something that most Americans agree on, right?
Yes.
This is, again, our language in the street seems that we're very extreme, but actually most of us agree that criminal background checks on every gun sale are a really good idea, and that people who are domestic abusers really don't need guns, and neither do people who with dangerous or serious mental health problems that would kind of preclude them being safe with a gun. So even I think there was a poll a couple of years ago that found that 84% of Arkansans agree that we need background checks.
Yeah.
So this is really a good example of where Moms comes in with a middle ground solution. And that's not the only thing we advocate for. We are big advocates of gun safety. So we think it's really, really important that guns are safely stored and safely kept, and that children don't have access to guns. And that's one place I think we can all agree on, because whether you're
Heavens, yes.
whatever your stance is, we want our kids to be safe. And so I think a lot of people may not realize how much they have in common with Moms Demand Action as a group, because we're really advocating for safety for our kids, for our communities.
Rebekah, what makes this personal for you? What made you decide to get involved with this group?
So last year, my oldest son was kindergarten age. And when it was time for him to go to school, I realized, maybe more personally for the first time, just the legacy of how school has changed and the culture around school that has changed since I've been there 20, 30 years ago, and how mass shootings have changed us so substantially and have changed our experience of school. And so obviously, I want my own kids to be safe, and that opened my eyes to a whole lot of other problems of gun violence in our country, and how different it is for Americans versus people living in other wealthy countries around the world. So him being big enough to go to school really opened my eyes. And then I began to see more and more kids in my office. I'm a psychologist. And so I began to see more and more kids coming in, families coming in, who had been exposed to gun violence in some way, whether it was somebody they knew, somebody in their family, some trauma they themselves had witnessed. And I got really tired of doing the treatment for that trauma, and I wanted to get involved in the prevention aspect of it.
I think what you guys are doing is a local chapter of
Yes.
a national movement, correct?
That's correct. So Moms Demand Action as a national movement began after the Sandy Hook school shooting in Connecticut, which has been over 6 years ago now. So when that happened, there was a mother in that area who looked around on Facebook and was looking for a group, kind of like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, but for gun violence prevention. She said, this has happened and I'm heartbroken and I want to give my money to somebody who's making a difference here. And she couldn't find anything. So she started this group, at her kitchen table on Facebook, and now it's grown. We have over 5 million supporters and a chapter in every state. And even in Arkansas, we have, I think, 12 local groups now, from Fort Smith to El Dorado to Jonesboro to Batesville, all over the state. So it's definitely a conversation I think people are starting to be willing to have, and starting to think about maybe with a little bit more nuance.
What type of events do you do? Do you have outreach? Is it mentoring? I mean, do you have mothers who have lost children in this group?
One of the goals of Moms Demand Action as a larger group is to kind of amplify the voices of survivors in the way that they want to be heard, and to support them with what they need. So we don't go out to find people who are survivors of gun violence and track them down and try to drag them into our group. That's not our method at all. But if somebody's interested and they have been touched by gun violence, we want to do everything that we can to support them and kind of help them make their voice heard if they want it to be heard, and kind of amplify what they need and what they want, because we feel like they are the ones
Are there
we're doing
specific
this work
services?
for.
Yes. Are there specific services you provide?
We have the state of Arkansas, and nationally we have a survivor network that provides some different support services, some education, and I think nationally even some counseling and some other things are provided to people in certain states. I don't think it's to Arkansas yet.
How would someone want to, who wanted to join you or find out more, how would they do that?
Well, they could do it a couple of different ways. One is they could text READY to the number 64433, and that's going to connect them to our national group and give them some information. But locally, and what I'd really prefer them to do, is to email us at Jonesboro Moms Demand Action @gmail.com. It's a long email address, but it's pretty straightforward. Jonesboro Moms Demand Action @gmail.com. We have monthly meetings. In fact, we're starting to have monthly meetings, 2 a month, that meet in the day and in the evening, so we can meet the needs of folks who work.
Right.
and can't get away during the day, and also folks who can't meet in the evenings due to commitments.
Now, how often did you say?
We're starting to meet twice a month. So in February,
Okay.
we're offering 2 meetings. They're going to be the same information and the same itinerary.
Yeah.
But they're going to be at different times, one in the day and one in the evening. So
Okay.
we're going to meet next week on February the 5th at San Francisco Bread Company at noon.
Wonderful. Do you lobby do you have any state or federal elected officials that are championing your cause?
Well, federally, if you look in this last election in 2018, we had several representatives coming into U.S. Congress who ran on a gun sense platform of wanting to make a difference, not from Arkansas necessarily that were elected, but in other places. In Arkansas, what we're doing, we're having an advocacy day on February 12th where we'll go to the Capitol and meet with our representatives and our state senators to talk about the bills that are in the Arkansas legislature right now and what we would like to see happen. So that's a really big focus for us. So advocacy, outreach, and then kind of educating the community about gun safety.
Right. What have you found to be the biggest misconception or the biggest hurdle to getting your common sense philosophy to a broader audience?
That's a really good question. I think maybe the biggest hurdle in our area is that we have such a strong culture of hunting and fishing and outdoor gun culture, right? And so I think when people hear gun reform, gun safety, moms demand action, sometimes they immediately think these people want to take our guns away.
Yes.
Right? And that's not the case at all.
Well, there is a mindset that any step back at all, any concession is a road to obliteration.
Right.
And it can't be that way.
Right. And so we really think that the conversation has to evolve. And so we're not for gun control. We are for reform and policy reform. And so it's really modeled after, if you look at what Mothers Against Drunk Driving did for us 30 years ago, people were being killed in drunk driving accidents all the time. And mainly what everybody said was, oh, isn't that a tragedy? Mm-hmm. Right? And there was not much move on the policy front or the legislative front to do anything about it. Mothers Against Drunk Driving came in and they worked and they worked and they worked to lower the legal limit for blood alcohol level. They worked to increase the penalties for drunk driving. They worked to work with the state legislatures to make it happen across the country. And they just didn't let it go until it happened. And now we're all much safer on the road than we were. And so nobody ever talked about taking away cars, but we did do a lot of things to make our driving experience safer. We set speed limits. We put in airbags. We made everybody wear seat belts. We're all safer because of it, but we still have the right and the responsibility to drive.
Well, I think we were all blessed with, most of us who were blessed with mothers who were the bulldogs of the family. When they really had their minds made up, it was going to get done. So I respect and appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
And is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about Moms Demand Action?
I'll tell you a little bit about how our Jonesboro group got started.
Great.
So after the Las Vegas shooting in 2017, there was a group of mothers who, most of them had children at international studies school. Okay. And they met outside the school and were heartbroken about another shooting in our country, mass shooting, and said, we've got to do something locally. They realized that there wasn't a local group doing anything about this particular issue, and so they got together and created the Jonesboro group, and it's been going ever since and really grew a lot over the last year. But that said, we have a lot of goals for the coming year. One of our big outreach programs is called Be Smart, and it's a gun safety program and a gun safety education for parents. The main component of our Be Smart program is that adults have the onus of responsibility of keeping children safe from guns. And so we're teaching adults to be smart, and that is to secure our guns in our homes, not to take away guns, but to secure them, right? To keep them locked and keep the ammunition stored separately so that children are not in danger, because we know that almost 5 million kids live in a home with a loaded, unlocked gun in our country. And these unintentional shootings are just deadly.
Right, and we don't hear all the stories of the unintentional shootings, the suicides that could have been prevented.
Right, right.
It's a crisis.
In my own life, I can think of 3 different unintentional shootings that have happened with people who are very close to me. And so it's something that touches everybody. There's a statistic that says that 44% of us know someone who's been shot with a gun. So it's not just a problem for this group or that group. It's everybody's problem, and everybody's got to work together for a solution. Yes. So we talk about securing securing all guns. The M is model responsible behavior around guns, which I think is something that a lot of people around here already are doing, but we need to do more of it and make sure that we're kind of sharing and educating and modeling that behavior around children especially. The third letter in Be Smart is A for ask. So when your children go to visit somebody's home, that we ask, hey, do you have guns in the home and how do you store them? Which, when I first started doing this, I would feel a little nervous asking my friends, hey, do you have guns? Because that seems like a third rail topic for us these days. But I've started doing it because I care about my kids being safe. And you know what? Not one person has had a negative reaction to that. In fact, every other mother or father I've mentioned it to has said, thank you so much for asking. Let me tell you what we do, or we don't have guns, or we do have guns, and this is how we store them. And
right.
And we're able to have that conversation about keeping our kids safe. So it's kind of like asking about, do you have a swimming pool? Do you have, hey, my kid has a peanut allergy. Do you, can you make sure that... So
it's a conversation people are willing to have if you're willing to ask.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have so many other hard conversations to keep our kids safe.
Right.
And this is just one more that really, isn't that hard. And it makes a huge difference. Because kids know where guns are. They're curious. Mm-hmm. They're impulsive.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
So we've got to be talking to each other as parents. Then the R of SMART is recognize the risks of teen suicide. So most of our gun deaths in America happen from suicide, not homicide.
Mm-hmm.
And teen suicide and suicide rates across the country are on the rise, which we could have a whole other program, talking about that specific issue. But we want to be really aware of teens and teen mental health and their access to guns and recognizing when they need help so we can get them help. And then the T of SMART is tell other people to be smart, that if we're talking about this with each other like you and I are today, if we're just having these nuanced and common sense conversations and we're looking for the evidence of really what's going to keep us safer and what's going to honor our country's background and keep us safe at the same time, then we're going to be on the right track.
Very good. Wonderful. Rebekah, thank you for taking time to visit with us today on Let's Talk Jonesboro.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure.